Yeah, so originally when I had this idea for RoundURS, it came from the sessions I would have with my dad. Now essentially, when I say sessions, I'm really just talking about me going and seeing him, bottle of Rare Nephews, couple drinks, and you know, he'd be showing me tunes from iTunes and different places, record boxes and all that. Now over the years, my dad's taste has really shaped my musical taste. And you know, as a DJ, I've grown to learn that some of them old dusty songs he used to show me when I was a youth actually had a direct correlation to the music I was growing up on at the time, which was hip-hop. You know, as my musical tastes expanded and my understanding of my dad's knowledge of music started to grow, I started seeing more correlations outside of hip-hop, you know, also in jazz, house and soul, all genres that fuel my own creative endeavours and influences.
Welcome to RoundURS. So basically, this is going to be a series where I visit people at their gaffs. We have a little chat about some music, and then essentially we go into a mix, you know. So I'm going to be providing some of my DJ skills to interact and transition through the songs, and they're going to be picking the songs.
You know, so I'm pretty sure we could do about 4 or 5 of these episodes just to my dad's collection, but as a strong starting point for this series, I thought we would go around to his, pick his brain about some of his tunes and, you know, get into a mix. So, yeah.
So, hello. Talk to me about your musical influences. I would say, knowing you, obviously, your musical taste and the era that you're from is somewhat called the golden era. For me, the music that I'm into. Talk to me about the influences and what was happening around the time of those influences.
Why do you think it was the golden era? I'm interested.
Do you know what? Do you know why I say that? Because a lot of the music you play in the house and a lot of the music I always used to hear about later on was sampled a million times.
To death, I think.
Yeah,
Sampled
in a good
to
way
death,
though.
yeah.
I think, you know, like a lot of the hip hop that is around now has been sampled from the 70s or 80s and stuff like that. So talk to me about some of the influences you had and also some of the songs that are going to be played in the mix later on.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it makes me think about sort of growing up in East London and some of the challenges, and it's very difficult to talk about music without talking about other influences as well, like school, like work. There are quite a lot of influences. And
talk to me about school, because that's what interests me. Like, what was happening around the time when you was growing up in secondary school? What was youth culture sounding and looking like?
Yeah, well, I can remember it quite vividly actually, because it was around about 13, 14 when, you know, you're trying to. I mean, music in East London has always been a very powerful force, and I think historically it's been about fashion as well. So fashion has always been hand in hand with music. And I can remember 13, 14, it was the first round of the skinheads. It was what I call the good skinheads, because everything was around ska, and I was trying to learn about music, not actively, but you're just surrounded by music. So you got introduced again into ska and reggae, and I think my first album was Reggae Chartbusters Volume 2. Yeah. But there was a naked woman on the front of it, so I think that's probably why I bought it more than the music.
Yeah.
And they had, I'm just trying to remember some of the records, I can't actually remember. So influences took a while. So fashion and early music was as one. And it was quite interesting. I started trying to find out about other forms of music as well, but I think I went through a quite dodgy period not knowing. And actually, the other thing at the time was radio. The thing you guys probably don't understand, it was like one radio station. It was Radio 1, just about Radio 1, and they never played. They didn't play any of the music that we liked. That I liked. Didn't play anything. And so there wasn't really a channel where you could hear your music. But you wanted to hear music, so you listen to it, and consequently, it shows you how influential radio was at the time. Because I was influenced, and I bought some dodgy 7-inch singles. I am not proud of the music that I bought. Very dodgy. But eventually you find out that actually there's more to it than that. And that's when you go deep underground. You know, and I started listening to Radio London. Eventually Radio London, Robbie Vincent, he spent a lot of my money.
Yeah.
Robbie Vincent on Radio London between 10 and 12.
Yeah.
He spent a lot of my money.
Yeah.
And what would happen is Robbie would come on, you'd sit by the radio with your pen and paper and you'd write the tunes down. And there used to be a shop in East Ham called Moondogs.
Yeah.
As soon as Robbie's finished, you're down to East Ham, Moondogs, and they were just unloading the van that come from the airport with the imports. They'd chalk up the records, and then you just listen to records. You say, right, I'll buy that one, buy that one, that one. So pocket money was going on music. You get it home, put the needle on the record, and you're listening to music. It's fantastic. And it opens up a completely different world.
Yeah. So around that time, what was... I'm trying to sort of pinpoint the main influence culturally. Was it like a lot of music coming over from America? Was it a lot of music coming over from the Caribbean? And in that sort of melting pot inside British culture, how was like all of that being bounced about?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've always had the influence of American music. You know, from the, you know, if you look at, cause I mean, I like jazz, which we'll talk about that later on. So you've always had an influence of American music. And because of the area and the population, you've had an influence of Caribbean music. So when I was talking about 13, 14, 15, you're talking about almost like a transition from ska to reggae. So you've got the early reggae music there. But, you know, American culture is very good at exporting itself and it beats up other cultures. And it wasn't really until... I'd say the 80s really, when, you know, West Indian culture fought back through all sorts of different artists. And you had a bit of a divergence between, you know, you're a soul head or you follow the reggae. But, you know, we'll get to that later. And so I don't think I could say there were particular artistic influences. There was music, there were genres of music that was quite influential. I didn't really get into artists. Probably, at the moment, I think I'll say until I heard Mr. Magic, Grover Washington, but that's jumping ahead a little bit and sort of winding back. I'm just trying to trace, you know, influences. And I'd definitely say that initially it was, you know, a genre of reggae music. But then when the import thing and American music that wasn't popular, when that just took my life over. Really. And as you know, I've got lots of vinyl. Lots of 7-inches.
I've got some of them as well.
Yes, I know you. I know you have. I know you have. So you know, so I was up to sort of probably the 2000s. I was probably a collector. The 90s wasn't really good for me for music. Didn't like it that much. But
where was this music being played though? Because in my mind, like when we were growing up, we had clubs. Yeah, and even if there wasn't clubs, there was like youth centres, like where people would be, you know, where you'd sort of get that injection of like, I guess, music and what was popping. Where was this happening in your time?
Yeah, there were clubs, and there've always been clubs. Yeah, but sometimes, in terms of licensing, some clubs, if they play too much black music, they get closed down. But there was always this thing about, well, if you're not going to play my music, we're going to have house parties. So you had house parties, very big in the 80s for my generation. Yeah, house parties in the 80s, playing rare groove and all that soul stuff and reggae stuff, lovers rock and all that stuff were very, very big. But again, I started going to a club called Lacy Lady up in Seven Kings when I was about 17, 18, and they used to play, again, funk and soul. Not much reggae, funk and soul. Because I'd say I'm sort of 60% soul, funk, jazz, 30, 40% you know, reggae and that stuff. So that's how. But in those days, 100% it was soul. But you grew up and there were clubs like, was it Columbo's? There was clubs like Columbo's, Ronnie Scott's. Upstairs at Ronnie's, they used to do some things. There were some clubs around.
Yeah.
They used to play music. Crackers was one I think your auntie used to go to.
Yeah. Hi, auntie.
100 Club used to do some. So there were some clubs around. But the thing, once you go outside of London, it was very.
Yeah. So London was very much the hub.
Yeah, but Birmingham did some things as well.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we're talking about underground movements here. We're not talking about, you know, popular movements.
Talk to me about that censorship, because I can draw a parallel with that censorship in terms of like, in terms of when I grew up, grime was very much in its sort of infancy. It's now a commercial success and a commercial vehicle, but there's still a massive level of censorship to it. And I think what you said that was interesting in terms of the censorship of black music. So talk to me about that in that time, because I'm interested to see how relevant that is to the times we are in now. Yeah,
I mean, I'm still trying to track back from when I first started, because there's so many different things. Some of it was really quite annoying. And censorship is probably too strong a word. It's the economics of the music industry, essentially. And one of the interesting things is that a lot of the American artists that were revered over here, when they first come over to the UK, they were surprised they sold out venues because they didn't know.
Yeah,
you know,
they didn't know there was a following.
They didn't know there was a following.
Yeah,
you know, because there's always been that sort of liking of American music, and similarly, you know, West Indian music, and you've got soca and all that sort of stuff that's very, very popular now. But I think censorship is a difficult word to talk about now, but there was definitely the economics and the politics of a time which excluded groups of people from mainstream. And once you start excluding people and cutting back on things, people find other ways of pursuing,
avenues, yeah.
other ways of pursuing. And I can remember there was a tune called by the Fatback Band called Spanish Hustle.
Yeah. Which Spanish Hustle.
That's the one. You still can't sing though, can you? Called the Spanish Hustle. And I can remember, and there used to be a magazine called Blues and Soul. I used to read Blues and Soul as well, because that used to give you an update of, and it was a good editorial, give you an update on what was going on. And I think there was a piece in it about it was selling a lot of records in London, but it didn't sell in any of the shops that the BBC Radio 1 took their samples from, because they used to just have a few shops, and their chart would come from those different shops. So it's only sales in those shops. But this record by the Fatback Band was selling like hotcakes.
Yeah.
I don't think it even charted at all. And actually there was a period where, you know, you watched Top of the Pops, stopped watching Top of the Pops after a while. You got the odd appearance of an artist, but it didn't really represent. And the other funny thing was Saturday Night Fever, which hit the streets 2 or 3 years after the clubs, the black clubs, were doing disco. It came late. It was quite funny when it came out. But, you know, back in those days, it's about dancing, it's about the music. You know, it wasn't even about drinking. I discovered drinking a little later on. Yeah. But it was just the music. You know, it's hardcore following the music. And then you had the all-dayers kicked in as well. You had Caister all-dayers. It was just amazing, amazing. You know, amazing stuff. But I'm still in my mind trying to track through. I suppose at some stage I should really try to walk you through, you know, the sort of the history, the timeline.
So let's talk about specific songs that you've picked for the mix today, then, and then we can talk about
that would be very helpful.
Their significance at the time.
Yeah.
One of the tunes I love,
Maze.
Before I Let Go. Wicked tune. Yeah. Talk to me about what was happening when that came out, when that song came out. Talk to me about what was happening in East London at that time.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I had gone to university. So I went to university at the end of the 70s. Because essentially, from the mid-70s to the early 80s, there was some seriously influential tunes. And then those tunes and the recording artists became very influential through the 80s. Specifically Maze, Maze and Luther Vandross at the time as well was kicking it up. I was at university, and I was in the Midlands, and there was a sort of a posse of us there, and we met some girls from Warwick University, Lorraine, Vanna, and they had their little musical thing going as well. So it was a heady mix of music, but that came very much out of, as I can remember, anybody watching this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember that coming from the house parties, you know. So you're getting together, and the age thing, the generational thing is important as well, because came out of university, you know, you think the world's at your feet as well, and the music went along with that. So, you know, we went through a phase of wearing bow ties and DJs and stuff, and, you know, being a bit posy and stuff, but it was all the house parties, and it was a fantastic time of youth and growing up and stuff. It was very, 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 very good. But Maze, I think they did a few tours in the 80s as well, which again, you know, those tours, it's like a rainbow nation, people from all colours, all different parts of the country, different parts of the world.
Which is vibes.
Maze, it was just a really nice vibe. Yeah. And first of all, it was Maze, and then it became Frankie Beverly, became quite big, and it became Frankie Beverly and Maze. But it was all part of that soul, funky scene. And just to say, there was a real hardcore of a thing called jazz funk as well, which was very much about jazz and popularising jazz for jazz musicians. So the way to popularise it was to fuse it with funk. So you got, you know, Donald Byrd, Lonnie Liston Smith. I haven't got any Donald Byrd, but I think I've got some Lonnie Liston Smith.
I think Parallels
on Expansions.
Expansions, that's it.
Yeah. So you had the soul thing, you had the jazz and jazz funk thing. Yeah. But eventually the jazz funk thing merged in what I knew as soul. It was called jazz funk. It was a bit weird, really, because it wasn't really, but, you know, terms. But also you had tribes. It's like tribes from different around the country followed different forms of music. Yeah. And you had...
But under the same umbrella of soul or jazz funk.
Yeah, you had things called Soul Patrol, this crew, that crew. It was good.
At that time, none of you had aspirations of going into the music industry or musicians or DJs?
I used to do some DJing, but I never really took it very seriously. Yeah. I mean, in my mind, I was always going to be successful as a professional in my career. Yeah. And the music come along with that as well. So I was that was my goal, and I invested all my energies in that. But the music is part of me, so that comes along with it. So however, there were one or two DJs. Eon Irvin. Eon, hope you're watching this. Eon Irvin, he used to DJ up at the West End. He was a big DJ. Yeah. But there was a time when, if you were a DJ, you'd play the records, and I was happy with that. But when somebody told me to put my hand on the record and start scratching, I ain't doing that.
No transitional skills.
Well, I spent my life taking records out of the covers, slowly putting them on the deck. Yeah. Putting the needle on the record. But now somebody's telling me I've got to put my fingerprints on the record. It's not happening. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen.
That's interesting, though. I think that's interesting, the fact that so many of you are so heavily invested into the culture, and there was a lot of love and there was a lot of vibes, but at the same time, none of you had the aspirations of wanting to go into it. Because nowadays, the music industry at the moment is very, very much fed by, you know, like black music, and I think a lot of my peers and people around me from a young age, we've always seen it as a thing where it's like you can do it. If you're into it, you know, there is that sort of if you work hard at it, you can get into the industry, you know.
But I think the thing to remember is that, as I say, there are many influences on this, and you've got to start tracking the influence of technology. And you see, back in the old days, when you talk about house party, you're talking about big speakers, you're talking about record decks, you're talking about, you know, a whole... Today, making music is much easier. You don't need... Technology makes it easier to access. Yeah. And maybe if the technology that is around now was around then, there might have been different choices. But I think I was always going to follow the professional path, most definitely. Yeah. I was always going to follow the professional path, and music would be a subset of that, but a very powerful subset. So not many of my peers, as I can remember, went into music. Not at all. So
That's interesting. Have we covered any rare groove in this yet?
What when you say rare groove, this annoys me, right?
The thing is, with my definition of genres is like I think it was what you're going to touch on. I'm not that, I'd say, well educated in terms of accurately describing. When I say rare groove, I know when I hear it what rare groove is. You know what I'm saying? But I know maybe saying it to you, that's a different thing. So I know you've touched on a few things at the moment, but has any of that been inside the rare groove realm? Well, I know there's a whole bunch of people that want to watch this that will watch it for the rare groove element.
Yeah, but you see, it drove me crazy, because I was spending a lot of money. I can remember I was on an exchange program when I was at university. I was on an exchange program to a university in New Jersey, and in those days you got a grant. You know, you had your tuition paid for. You got a grant, and I think you're getting $3, $4, $5 to the pound back in those days. Yeah. And Freddie Laker was doing the thing as well. Freddie Laker was the first. He was the equivalent of Ryanair EasyJet.
Yeah. Okay.
£50 back in those days got you across to the Atlantic.
Yeah. Okay.
On SkyTrain. Yeah. And I was on one of the first to go across. But I mean, it was my first trip to America, and all I could think was getting to the first record shop and buying as much vinyl as I could.
Yeah.
So I had my grant, and it was a lot of money. I was like a king. I had so much money because I had all these dollars, and all I wanted to do was get to the record shops and buy music. And I ended up bringing, I don't know, so many albums back. But they stopped me in customs and frisked me. I didn't have to pay any tax or anything. But so I went to America, and I was spending a lot of money on music. And then there was a moment in the early 90s, I think, when this thing called rare groove kicked in. I think, well, what's rare groove? And actually, in the early 90s, it was basically all the music that wasn't played in the house parties and stuff. Nice music as well. And I'd never heard of most of it.
Yeah.
And there was a guy, Elroy, was it Elroy? There was a guy who used to live in Forest Gate. And I think he did a compilation album. I can't remember his name. It's not Trevor Nelson, there's another guy. He did a compilation, and these were tunes that were not that popular, but still really good. The other thing is that you had a little bit of movement from Northern Soul, because you've got this thing called Northern Soul, where they do funny dances and stuff. But these are records that were sort of, some of them not released by some of the labels. But again, black musicians, black artists, and some of them are quite dodgy, but some of them are actually quite good, and they translate over as well.
So we've spoken a lot about the spectrums, and you know, in terms of the different genres that we're going to be going through today. One of them, in my eyes, kind of touch on what I would describe as rare groove. Now, I'm kind of aware that my description of rare groove is slightly different to your description of rare groove. So talk to me about what you understand rare groove to be.
Yeah, this is a very difficult question, because the first time I saw rare groove mentioned recently, I thought, oh, that's interesting. I remember that from the late 80s, early 90s. And then when I was listening to the music that was classified as rare groove, I thought, what's that? What's that? Because it was a 2000 tune or whatever, and it was more a contemporary thing as opposed to what was rare groove. Now, I mean, I'm not saying I sort of was there at the beginning of everything, but I can remember rare groove, and I'm sure it was the early 90s that the term presented itself, and I was in shock because I thought I'd bought a lot of music, and then this term came, and I thought, well, what is it? And I started listening to it, and it was really a lot of really good music that I just never heard before, and probably for some aficionados, they'd picked up on it, but I missed some of this stuff, and I thought, well, what am I spending my money on? You know. Yeah. But anyway, these tunes some of them are really, really nice tunes, and it just broadened this spectrum of what soul and funk was. And I know I'm talking a lot about soul and funk because we mustn't forget sort of reggae as well, because it had its own structure and its own thing. So it will be useful to touch on that at some stage. But this notion of rare groove. And I think it also, there was the thing with Northern Soul, and it gets a bit complicated because a lot of the Americans, they don't know what they've got sometimes. So sometimes music was popularised over here and then gone back to the States. It was originated in the States. And then there was a lot of DJs that went to the old labels in America and just went through boxes.
Yeah.
And so they got a lot of the music and then brought it to the UK as well. So a lot of music that wasn't really marketed very well, didn't sell, bombed, has almost like been resuscitated. So this notion of rare groove is quite a complex one. So that's sort of my understanding of it. And it's presented itself recently as well, so I'm not sure what it means in a contemporary sense. But I know what it meant to me back in those days.
I've added some songs to the mix that I kind of, contemporary songs that I understand to kind of be rare groove or touching on that type of...
Which ones have you
You know what, the Dwelle Find a Way song, I think that's almost like a rare, what I understand rare groove to be anyway.
Why would you call that a rare groove tune then?
I guess it's just kind of the feeling of the song. Like some people may call it R&B or whatever the case may be, where there's that sort of music that you play at a family thing, like a christening or something like that. That to me is what I kind of understand rare groove to be. You know what I mean?
This is where I think the definition of something like that is I think it can be whatever you want it to be, and I suppose the context for me explaining rare groove is popularity, because there were indications of how popular a tune was. And if you didn't hear a tune, then it couldn't be that popular. But it's those tunes that were not popularised that suddenly became rare groove, you see what I mean? Now, I couldn't tell you, because that is a really nice song, but I couldn't tell you how popular it was when I bought it. I think I bought it, I went to see a friend in... Raymond, hi! Went to see Raymond...
Wrong camera, that camera.
I went to see Raymond in Toronto, and I bought... It was Pevin Everett and Dwelle that I bought over there. But I don't know how popular they were. I know I liked the tune, and I heard it a few times over this country, but I don't know how popular it is.
Yeah.
And I think the original, if I was going to say there was a definition of rare groove, I would say, by definition, it's rare. It's a record that was released that didn't hit the streets in any big numbers.
And that's what you're talking about,
and then it was resuscitated. And then it's picked up again. So, but that is just my interpretation of what I believe happened back in the day.
So, talking about things coming across from the Atlantic, America, let's talk about what came across from the Caribbean. Because London, you can't have London the way it is today without the sort of the influence of Caribbean culture. So talk to me about the influence of reggae and how that grew inside London, and also, I guess, Britain's effect on reggae as well.
Yeah, but I mean, one of the themes of American and Caribbean influence is, and I suppose it happens in many different countries, because America is so good at exporting itself. It exports itself
machine, isn't
to
it?
different parts of the globe. It's so good, and some of it's really good. What it exports, some of it's really good, and some of it's not so good, as we know. But but in the UK, there's always a search for UK identity. So there's always those groups that would mimic American groups, and some of them are good and some of them not so good. But I think every time this happened, we got better and better at it now, and I think now we have our own people that make UK soul and funk, and it's really good. But it's taken a long time to get to that point. Similarly with reggae, and so at the same time as I'm talking about soul and funk, you had Lovers Rock, for instance, which is a specifically UK form of reggae. So you're talking about love and stuff, and some fantastic records. I mean, I've got one or two. I think I've got some Louisa Marks on the mix.
Love with a Dreadlock.
No. It's not. That's Kofi, I think. But I've got a Louisa. Tell It Like It Is. Not Tell It Like It Is. Anyway, we'll come to that. But Lovers Rock was big. Yeah. Big music. And of course you had Bob Marley at the same time doing, because you got conscious reggae as well. Third World as well. I went to see Third World, one of the best gigs I ever saw in my life. They were fantastic.
Where did you see them?
At the Rainbow. I saw the Rainbow. I saw them at the Rainbow. And actually, the other interesting thing is a group called Heatwave, which was, and the guy that wrote for MJ came from Heatwave. and I've forgotten his name, had potted face. But anyway, he was in Heatwave, and there was Johnny Wilder, and Heatwave were a mix of UK and American musicians. Very popular in the UK. I'm not sure they were so popular in America, so they did a lot of touring around the UK. Went to see Heatwave, and actually Heatwave got it. They understood the UK audience. And we went to see, and one of their tunes is called Mind Blowing Decisions. So they started doing, you know, you hear the first thing, Mind Blowing, everybody's going crazy. And then they went into this reggae version of Mind Blowing Decisions, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
It really was. But they got it, you see, because they were trying to fuse the two. So you got to imagine, in London and growing up in London, you had this reggae thing, and you had this soul thing going on. Yeah. And I was very much a soul boy, you know, but eventually I had straddled both. Yeah. Because some of the music coming through on the reggae side was so good.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you had, you know, Backyard, you had, as I say, Bob Marley. Concrete Jungle was one of my favourite Marley tunes. It's just so much. My brain's gone blank now, but there's so much reggae.
We could do a whole another episode on reggae.
Well, alone.
I think
alone.
So. Yeah.
But actually, the great thing in the 80s was Carnival.
Yeah.
Carnival was another place where the funksters and the reggae guys come together.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was Saxon International.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, because in those days, one deck. So you got to change the record, do the toasting, do the toast at the same time, and keep it going. And Saxon at Carnival in the 80s was at Papa Levi. I'm just remembering something named Papa Levi. Some of those toasters, man, serious. And again, you got rapping, but the forerunner to that was the toasting that happened on the you know, I Roy, you Roy, all them Roys, you know, all those guys, you know. So,
and that was the seeds of what later I had experience in youth culture with grime and
rap I mean,
and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the toasting. You've got to go way back in Jamaican music, Caribbean music to track the toasters. And you've got some crazy people, crazy people. And then I suppose that develops into, you know, a bit of Shabba Ranks and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, you got to track that lineage. And I'm not saying I know all of it, because, you know, some of the stuff. But I was educated by good people. You know, Lorraine.
We're gonna do an episode with Lorraine.
Yeah, you got to. We're coming for you, Lorraine. No. Lorraine is somebody you have to speak to. You know. Yeah. Raymond too, but he's more a sort of listener now. But you know, I had some very good influences. Earl as well is very good on his music. Particularly jazz. So, you know, I had some good educators, very good educators. It's quite interesting that the more I think about the reggae influences, and again, one of the records you've got, Black Focus, is a fusion, because you have African influences coming in as well later on. But I suppose my struggle is the actual specific times when these things happen, and I'm not sure you can talk about time. Things just happen. Yeah. You know, where it actually physically began, I'm not sure you can say that, but things just happen. Yeah. And you had a good influence of African music as well coming in, as you do now, like Fela Kuti and all that stuff.
What was that you had a record laying around here? Is it still around here?
I don't remember it.
That's up there or something.
Yeah, that's another good 12-inch. That's a very good 12-inch. So, you know, it's quite interesting when you take these different influences, but it's also important to talk about the politics, because again, for instance, Saxon, some of the things they talked about was the sus laws, where you got stopped and searched. And that would present itself through, because the thing about particularly, you know, Jamaican music is it's
rebel
often
music, a lot of that.
Often it represents the politics of the time.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you had politics in Jamaica with Manley and Siaga, Michael Manley representing sort of the socialist part of and trying to do good for the country, and lots of people killing, and you had, you know, one party killing people from another party, but this also came through in the music. So there's an aspect of, and I haven't really touched on this, there's an aspect of soul and funk and reggae, and which is about politics, you know. So I think we've got some Marvin Gaye there, you know, the What's Going On track, but that represented a much deeper view of politics, global politics, but also politics to do with black culture as well. And through the 60s and the early 70s, you had, the Black Power movement was very powerful, and books like from Eldridge Cleaver, Angela Davis, all of these types of, but that also influenced music. Then you have Gil Scott-Heron picking up some of that through the 70s and 80s, talking about, his political thing. And I don't think I've got any Gil Scott, but he did stuff called The Bottle and The Revolution Won't Be. So there's a rich. It's all mixed together. So it's not just about love and funk and enjoying yourself. Although that's what we did. There's politics going on at the same time, and it's important to understand the political side of things. Yeah. I don't want to go too far down that road because it's not everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand the importance of that. 3 songs. 3 songs.
Oh my God, no! 3 songs.
3 songs that I'd say changed or shaped your musical view of things.
If you ask me this question every day,
you'll get 3 different.
You'll get 2 records the same.
Yeah.
But the third one will be different.
Will change.
Yeah.
Today, what are the 3?
Well, the 2.
Yeah.
The 2 that I would have to say. One is Lonnie Liston Smith.
Yeah.
Expansions, which is on the list.
Why is that on the list?
Because
why would you pick that one?
Because the other part that I've mentioned, there's so many things I haven't mentioned really, is that what went along with the music is dancing. So you had to bust some moves. And
Can you still bust
particularly, I can just about bust a move or 2. And particularly with jazz funk, it wasn't the music only. You had to dance. And they had got some guys called IDJ. They used to just do dancing to the music, fantastic dancing. But you had to learn some moves. And this is not 2-step. This is completely different. You're talking about jazz moves and some people that were able to dance, fantastic. So Lonnie Liston Smith was one of the fusion artists. So he fuses funk and jazz in a beautiful way, which I think to me is expressed very well through that record. So so when we talk about jazz funk fusion, to me that's the epitome of it. And he did some other tunes as well, but to me that's one of my favourite tunes ever. That is. So that's number 1. The second track would be Grover Washington, Mr. Magic. If there's a cooler record than that from Mr. Washington or from anybody else, I haven't heard it. It's about 7, 8, 9 minutes long, and words fail me. It's just a beautiful piece of funky music, which you can listen to at 3 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. To me, it's just beautiful. And it takes you through different phases. The construction of it is fantastic. And again, as you mentioned earlier, I can't play an instrument or anything, but to me, it's constructed beautifully. And also, his mastery of the saxophone on that record is, I'm shaking now just talking about it. It's just, to me, it's just a beautiful, beautiful record. And actually, funny enough, the thing I would say is that with these types of records, people just should not do a copy. It's like the Crown Jewels, you should not try and copy them. However, I heard 2 versions.
I'm glad you
I've heard 2 versions.
I'm glad you said this, because I've got one. I was thinking when you were saying this, I know a version of it. I'm going to throw it into the mix.
I've got 2 versions of
I'm going to play you a version.
I've got 2. One by Ronnie Laws, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
Amy Winehouse did a version.
There we go.
Earl said, listen to this. And I thought, no. And she's put words to it as well. I thought, no.
Do you know what? And when you sent me that track for the mix, I thought, boom. Like, that's one of the ones I'm going to flip. So I'll put that into the mix as well. So
Amy Winehouse.
Her version's wicked. Cold.
It is. And there's another, anyway, again, so much music now coming into my head. Now I'm struggling for the third one. Because it could be one of 1,000 songs. So which one am I going to do? I feel like I should choose a reggae track, but I can't. So I'm not going to choose a reggae track. But when we do this again, I'm going to flip it around because I'll choose a different 3 records. I got heavily into Latin jazz, which again is an extension of jazz funk. Really, it's a version. And Manfredo Fest is the tune. Jungle Kitten. it just drives me mad.
Yeah,
And I used to dance to this record, but it just drives me mad. It's just, but there's so many other artists. I mean, I could just throw in there, you know, because I could choose a Marvin Gaye, for instance.
Yeah.
Because that what's going on album, 1971, it was made, and people are still playing tracks from it now, and it's got track on track on track, and it's almost, to be honest, it's just like one single. You could just let it run. In fact, they do run, some of the tracks run into, each other, but I could choose a track from that. So,
well, listen, let's get into this mix. So we covered a lot in the last, I don't know, how
45 minutes, I think.
But yeah, we spoke about a lot of different genres, a lot of different spectrums of music. In terms of the tracks that you want to throw into the mix, let's just vibe it. I'll vibe off of you, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay, so much music though, you know, so much music. We could talk all day
for sure.
about different things. I hope that people sort of like the approach that we've taken here. I've touched on a few things, but hopefully we'll get another time to drill down a little bit more into what's going on. Good interview.
Come on, G.
I taught you well. Well done, it was good.